Have you ever thought it was a little bit weird whenever the Bible talks about things like being a victor and conquering and these different phrases that sound a lot like winning? I find it a little bit weird because if you think about it, a lot of the people in the Bible don't really live lives like this. I mean, sure, you have a lot of people in the Old Testament who end up, conquering against overwhelming odds, these, mighty armies and powers and whatnot. But if you think about the life of Christ and the apostles, you think about the early church, I mean, there's a lot of people who didn't really have what we would call luxurious lives or really very peaceful ends of their stories. When I think about this whole concept, something comes to mind, and something comes to mind very often, which is my favorite movie that I might have mentioned before, 300.
Spartans! Lay down your weapons! Come and get them!
Man, doesn't that just make you want to go invade Persia? Maybe not, maybe just me. Anyway, when I sit here and I think about the theme of what we're talking about here today, these ideas of victory and conquering and trophies and all this kind of stuff, I think about a scene at the very end there where one of the characters is giving a speech, and in this impassioned speech, he has this phrase where he says, "Long I have pondered my king's cryptic talk of victory." And when I think about that, it makes me think of this big idea, if you will, that we're going to talk about today, which is the cryptic nature of victory in the Bible. And what do I mean by that? I mean, when you really start digging into it, once again, there's a lot of people who end up living very rough lives. I mean, Christ himself ends up talking a lot about how I'm calling you, to these places that might even be dangerous, people who may reject you, people who may arrest you and persecute you. So why do we consider that to be something that leads to victory? I mean, especially for people whose lives end up just kind of existing and even ending in these places of poverty and persecution. We're going to dig into this a little bit more, but I want you to just talk about that first real big idea there. The fact that victory in Christ is cryptic. What does that mean to you? Where do you think this cryptic victory in Christ may differ from the rest of the world we see around us? It's an interesting subject and something that is really interesting to me, but I think it begs the question, why does God put us in this situation? Why does God allow us to have these cryptic, odd victories that look a lot like defeat? And I think that might be asking the question a little wrong whenever we ask that about other Christians or even ask that about ourselves. Because you see, the reality is we have to start at the place of saying like, well, why are these things happening at all? Why are we going into these bad situations as Christians who maybe seem like they're not going to lead to any kind of win or any kind of victory? Well, here's my second big idea for you, and that's that the fighter isn't going to win their fight unless they actually enter the fray. You see, Christ actually calls us to live lives where we are going to enter the fray. And the fray against what? Well, we live in a world that's clearly fallen, right? And when I say the world, I want to be very careful here. I'm not talking about the other people we see walking around. Other people are not the enemy. And so often that's exactly what Christian society does is, we end up treating ideas and concepts and people and groups that aren't Christian like us, and we end up treating them like they're the adversary, but they're not. They're just people living their lives dealing with the same things that we're dealing with. Now, the thing that we're trying to fight is all of the sin and all of the ideals of the world. And yeah, they may be things that come from people, but ultimately it's kind of the culture, it's the society, right, that we live in. Those are the things that we're battling against. And rest assured, there is an adversary, and that adversary is working through people and institutions and all types of things in order to sit here and try to suppress the gospel. He doesn't want the gospel to get out there. But in order for us to be a part of that fight, in order for us to become a part of this cryptic victory that Christ describes, we have to be willing to enter the fray. Now, it would be a very fair question to ask, well, why are we having to enter a fray? Why is God calling us into a place where we're going to have to face these seemingly overwhelming odds where the entire world may be against us? Not necessarily because, again, people are like persecuting Christians in the modern sense, but because a lot of people think they don't need what it is the Bible has to offer. They don't need what Christ has to offer. Why are we being put in these very hard situations? Well, here's your third big idea. If we started out by saying that there is a cryptic victory through Christ, and then we got into saying that we have to actually enter the fray if we want to see any kind of victory, we also have to understand that God calls us into these places because what we end up finding out is that in these difficult situations, we see that there's really only one thing that can cause us to come through on the other end smelling like roses, and that's going to be God. He's going to be the thing that's going to carry us through, and that's going to push us beyond everything that this world has to throw at us as individuals and as a church. There's a little bit there in John 16:33 that to me is just so amazing because it's Christ saying, I have conquered the world. Christ is in effect the victory. That's what it is. He is the one who has gone through and already defeated everything that needs to be defeated. We're just here to kind of like keep it going, to, help that victory resonate with the lost world so that, again, those people that we were talking about who are not the adversary, so that those people can see what God has to offer them, the fullness of life, the blessings that go beyond what we have in the here and now. That last little bit that I just said, the blessings beyond the here and now, is kind of the fourth big idea. It's that why does victory have to be cryptic? Why can't victory just be the same thing that the rest of the world sees so that way, it'd make our lives a whole lot easier trying to explain what Christ has to offer? Well, it's because the trophy that we're after is different than the trophy that the world is after. That's why it seems so cryptic. You see, if we were after the exact same trophy, there wouldn't be any of this ambiguity about what Christ is doing or what he conquered. But the reality is that here's what the world sees. We're born, we live a life, and we die. As the old adage goes, when you look at a gravestone, you see those two dates, the first date, the beginning, and the last date. Life is about what happens in between, the little dash in between, those two dates. This is this phrase I've heard before. Well, that sounds nice, but the reality is that's not what life is about. Life is about so much more. It's about what Christ died for. He didn't die so that life in the here and now in this temporary world would be absolutely amazing, because it's absolutely not. What he died for was so that we could enjoy life everlasting in heaven, reconciled with our Creator. That trophy is so much bigger. It's so much more awesome than anything this world could even hope to offer us. Right there where Paul quotes out of Hosea is saying, "Where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting?" See, that's the victory that the world is after. The world wants everything that this life has to offer. But the sting is taken out of the death that a lot of us, unfortunately, are going to have to go through, because we have an everlasting life. We have something that goes beyond, that's bigger. And that allows us, knowing that that trophy is right there, it enables us to be able to push through, to endure, to be able to get to whatever's on the other side of the trials that we're going through right now. That can seem like something that may be kind of cheap if bluntly, you're kind of looking at all this and going like, but I can't really touch that and I can't really feel that. But that's why having that personal relationship with Christ is so important, because it's that intimacy with Jesus Christ, that personal relationship that allows us to be able to feel those little tiny bits of eternity in our lives in the here and now. Every single time that we see an individual blessed, every single time that we see a little miracle in our own lives, every single time that we're able to show love and compassion to an individual that the world says is not deserving of that, those are little tiny tastes of the everlasting life that we get. Not because those hardships are going to exist in heaven, but because it is those types of virtues. It is that feeling of joy and that feeling of satisfaction and of belonging. That is the thing that Christ offers. That's what God wanted in the beginning. A creator reconciled with his creation that is all one. That is the oneness that we're after. That is the trophy that we're after once we get to the end of all of this. But because we're after something so much bigger, we can endure things that the world couldn't even comprehend. I hope you're able to get something out of today, and until we can meet again, God bless.